So let's start back with passage 2, begin passage 2. So we're just gonna read through now, and you can just notice what I've highlighted, and up to you what you highlight. Okay, so active participation. Make sure you're focused just on reading the passage. Just like in math, we take something and we're using, this is pretty straightforward to help with the focus of annotating and pulling out the main ideas, right? So that's what this is about. I know you know the information, but it's about showing how to use the information to annotate better. All right? Let's go ahead and assign paragraphs. Passage 7, volunteer for passage 7. Betty, 8. James, 9. Fred, 10. Kimani, 11. Jayla, 12. Josiah, 13. Nat, 14. Mason. All right, we'll stop and get some more after that. Okay. So, paragraph 7, will you begin?
On the last day of January in 1960,
Zell,
Blair Jr. came home from college and casually asked his parents permission to cross some subway. I'd like to know, he said, because tomorrow we're going to do something that will shake up this town.
So Betty, what paragraph? So first of all, you can already tell this is a different style, right? This is not the same style of writing as the first paragraph, the first passage, right? The first passage was just informational, right? This passage is a narrative. The first passage was informational writing. This is a narrative. Still a narrative. Isn't that still a narrative? Isn't this telling a story? Does it have conversations? Narrative. Okay? So the first passage was an informational passage. This is a narrative. So we're using two text types, an informational passage, a narrative passage, to talk about civil rights in the 50s and 60s, right? And how people began to change the unfair laws and traditions. Everybody good with understanding why that's a passage? A narrative. All right, Betty, in the narrative, in the first paragraph, what happened?
Well, they want to do something to shake up the town, like where asked.
Okay, so a young college kid came home to his parents and said, tomorrow we would like to do something that's going to shake up the town. Now, if you just read that by itself, you're like, oh, they're going to go to do something to play a prank or something. But that's not what this is. This is about doing something good, right? But you don't know yet, because do you think that the writer of this passage, Mrs. Jones, Miss Jones, whatever, there, wrote that way on purpose? Yeah, to make you wonder, if you didn't know, to wonder, what are they going to do? We know because we know the story, right? We don't know necessarily this person's story, maybe. We know what the sit-ins are. Do you think that's an effective way to start that narrative? I do. That's way better than saying, in January 1960, E.L. Blair Jr. decided to begin the sit-in movement. That's a way better way to say it. Much better writing there, I think. Paragraph 8.
What Blair and 3 other students at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College accomplished the next afternoon did shake up their town. Greensboro, North Carolina. The shockwaves from the action reverberated across the United States and changed the way blacks and white people live together.
Okay, so James, in that paragraph of the narrative, what happened?
It gave us a little foreshadowing on what might happen.
Right? Okay. So this is not a personal narrative, right? I think that's what maybe some of you are like, wait, that's not. It's a telling of a story by someone else about people that are real life people, right? So we now know where it happened, where they went to school, and that the reason they wanted to do something that was going to shock the town in North Carolina, right? Okay, was North Carolina a state involved in the Civil War on the southern side? Yes. Do you remember about when you studied the Civil War in 5th grade? Were they a state where there were more people that understood it wasn't the right thing to do than maybe some other southern states? What do you think? The answer is yes. Why? They were what? Closer to the Mason-Dixon line. Remember what that is? The dividing line between the southern states and the northern states. Tennessee was another one of those that was in the northern part of the South. So, basically in Tennessee, do y'all remember how it fell? Basically, East Tennessee wanted to go for the north, and West Tennessee wanted to go for the south, and middle was in the middle. Okay, North Carolina has some similar things. So do you think it was maybe significant that this began in North Carolina and Tennessee? Because the bus sit-ins began in Tennessee, right? So I don't have guaranteed proof, but I feel like those were two states that were closer to the line between the north and south, and it felt like the further south you went, the more extreme it was, because of some of the most extreme civil rights conflicts were further south, and that's where the Civil War had the strongest support, was the further south, because they didn't want to give up the financial benefits of having slavery, right? So it was not only the Civil War fought because of moral reasons, but it was economical too. Because the people in the South were like, yeah, but then I can't use all this free labor to get rich off of. Right? Question. Is there any other situation currently where something like that might still be going on? Where there's unfair practice in the world of profit and trade, manufacturing. Yep.
So you could say with plastic, because people know that plastic is bad and like we should recycle it and stuff.
But it's get rich,
people keep
right?
making it because it's easy to make and it can be really recycled.
They can make it easily. They can make lots of money off of it. Yep. Something else besides that. Different something. Yep.
In China, a lot of people they don't work for very much,
And that's where I was headed with that. So very much of the things that are sold in this country are manufactured in Asian countries because it is remarkably cheaper to get it produced and then sell it to make more profit. Because you can't hire people in this country to do the work for anywhere close to the same price. Is that fair? Doesn't feel fair, does it? So it's, in a way, it's the same kind of idea, isn't it? So it's something you should think about as a person, that there's no way to escape buying things that are manufactured there because it's almost everything now. But it kind of has a mirror of the same idea, I feel like. Because the South didn't want to give up their easy profits because they didn't want to pay for that stuff to get done. They wanted to get it done for free because then they make more profit, right? Okay, so just wanted to point that out. All right, so paragraph 2, we basically found out what that shakeup was going to be about, and we had one word that is footnoted. What is the footnoted word, Lincoln? Reverberated. Now, you probably know what it means, but if you didn't, There are context clues there that tell you exactly what it means. What are they? What are the context clues that tell you exactly what that word means? Liam.
Waves and sort of across the United States.
Yep. If you didn't know what reverberated means, you know now it means let lots know. It's like it spread. That's exactly what it means. It means to spread out. But you think of it spreading out like this, from a small to a really large. Think of it like echoing out. So reverberated means to echo out. So it spread like this. All right? So that's exactly right. And if you didn't know that word, you could figure it out from the context. Right? Anybody want to raise your hand and say that's what you actually did? It's okay if you didn't. Because you may not could have, because you already knew what the word meant. Let me ask it this way. Raise your hand if you can see very clearly how there is context that defines that word in that sentence. That's textbook example of context clue right there. Perfect example. All right. Paragraph 9.
In 1960, especially in the South, things were quite different for black people. Blacks could sit in certain sections of the theater, usually in the balcony. Public swimming pools and golf courses were off limits. Blacks couldn't use the same water fountains as white people, and even public libraries were sometimes restricted.
Now, you notice I did not mark all the examples with red this time because we did that in the first passage. But what I did underline here are just some additional things that weren't talked about in the first passage, right? The first passage didn't talk about the water fountains. They did not talk about swimming pools and golf courses. So that would be added to our list, right? So there are more things we could add to our list. And I would probably say I should turn those red, right? Because they would tie back to the others. Would you think that would be more helpful to make those red? Because they would go back to the examples we did in the first passage? I would agree. I think so. So I'm going to do this. Maybe. Yep.
They did talk about heaters and water fountains.
They what? They did talk about water fountains in the first one?
Yeah, they talked about movie theaters too.
But I didn't mark movie theaters on here. See, I left that one off because it had already been talked about. So I may have got water fountains twice. But you get my point, right? All right. Paragraph 10. Now again, this is still a narrative, even though they're giving you some background information in the narrative, right? Because it's telling the story of a specific episode, right? See how it's a narrative? Would you agree? Can you see that? Who's next? Okay.
Dr. Martin Luther King.
Oh, did I move it? No. Wait, it's 10. Are you 11? Okay, Kiwi, do 10.
Segregation means forcing people of different races to live, work, and go to school apart. Integration, the opposite, means the removal of legal and social barriers that segregate racial groups.
Okay, so this is an example of just the words you need. Segregation, apart. Integration, the opposite of segregation, removal, barriers separating racial groups. See how I just got the main words? See how that's way better than underlining all of that? Because that gives you the main point. All right, 11.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights leader and president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, said that segregation for years had been America's shame. Beginning in 1950, African Americans and Native
segregation and to march, boycott, and protest.
Okay? So again, I highlighted segregation has been known as America's shame. You will hear people talk about America's original sin is slavery, meaning that's the number one beginning problem that America has had is that segregation began by the idea of slavery. Horrible part of our history, but it's what happened. And then I wrote down African Americans began to march, boycott, and protest segregation as a way to help to stop it. Because the young people realized there is something we can do to stop this instead of just accepting it. Paragraph 12 is whose? Okay, Jay, who? She just read. Okay, who's 13? Mason's 14, I remember.
13.
You're 13? Okay, so Josiah, you're 12? Okay, Josiah, 12. Because it was you, Nat, Mason, so go ahead.
Blair and his friends David Whitman, Joseph McNeil, and Franklin McLean, they adopted King's philosophy of civil disobedience. When they had read about
Mahatma.
Gandhi's success with passive
Resistance.
and India, both King and Gandhi believed in peacefully disobeying unjust laws and customs.
So this paragraph reminds us that the kids in this story had read about Dr. King and that he was talking about to make this change, we have to civilly disobey. And he was getting this idea from Gandhi. Gandhi was saying you're going to make a difference not by returning the same kind of behavior, but by protesting, but doing it in a nonviolent, passive way. Because then you're taking out the power of the wrongdoers. But it's very, very, very hard. I'm just adding that part in. All right? So that's what he was saying. That Gandhi had in India the philosophy of, make your point, but do it in a nonviolent way. Which we all know is why it was successful, because they did it in a nonviolent way. The people who were like, we have to stand up and say this is not okay, and we need to change things. All right? Think how different the history of our world, our country would be if that had not happened when it did. Things would not be the way they are now. This country might not be as successful as it is now. It could have fallen because of the unjustness that was going on. Who knows? But definitely wouldn't be the same. 13.
Lots of college students talked about taking action, but Blair and his friends decided to stop talking and do something. According to Richmond, we used to question, why is it that you have to sit in the balcony? Why do you have to ride in the back of the bus?
Okay, and I picked a different color to mark that question because that's an important question. They were like, but why is this? Question, why is this happening? Because remember, just because something is a law doesn't mean it's right. Right? Not always. A lot of times those are synonymous, but they're not always. Okay, Mason.
The Ford chose Monday, February 1st, after their last class that day. They met at the campus library and headed for downtown, 15 minutes.
Okay, paragraph 15. Courtney, will you do it? John's, that's his last name.
No, that's the start of a mistake.
Okay, so Nathaniel, I think you were misunderstanding what I'm saying. John's is the name of the store person, the last name of the store owner. It is in the sentence, but it's not. McNeil's a different person. That's not McNeil Johns. That's two people. All right. So in there, we found that the first place they went was to a clothing store because there was a man there who owned that store who was white, but also agreed that it was unfair, and so he was a supporter and supported these kids because kids don't have any resources yet, but he did. So he provided them not only some advice as being a grown-up of what to do, but also gave them money to help. All right, paragraph 16, someone who has not read. Who has not read? Josie, will you read?
Paragraph
16.
The four young men then proceeded to Woolsworth Pliers and dined on South Elm Street. They made a few purchases of school supplies, shoe polish, and toothpaste at counters that accepted the
Okay. Then came the big test. Take a seat and ask to be served at Woolworth's white-only lunch counter. So here's what a Woolworth's was. Okay, there's a Woolworths in downtown Nashville that was there that they reopened a few years ago for the restaurant part. But back then, drugstores and five and dimes, a five and dime means most of the items were inexpensive items, like what we now call dollar stores or Five Below. That would have been a five and dime back then. It'd be like a lot of the materials that you'd buy in a dollar store now, right? Inexpensive items. So nickel and dime items. Doesn't mean that was the only thing in there, but think of it like an old-fashioned drugstore, but they also had an area where you could go and get a sandwich at a counter. So a lunch counter is what that is, in case you didn't know that. I think you probably did. But they went over into the store and bought supplies, which they were, quote, allowed to do. But if they wanted to get food, they would have to go over to this separate area and get served and take it to go. Right? They couldn't sit down in the seats and eat. Okay, so that's what they decided was the next thing they would do that day is sit down and see if they could get service. And of course, whoever the waitress or waiter was like, what am I supposed to do? All right? So, paragraph 18. Who would like to read? Fallon, will you read that one?
We bet we were scared. Remember Jamie Richmond? We didn't know what to expect. We figured we would be arrested.
Okay. So they felt like, we're going to do this. We're probably going to get arrested, but we're going to try to take a stand. Chloe, would you read 19? I think your hand went up.
A black waitress demanded to know what the students were doing. You know you're supposed to eat at the other end, she said, referring to the stand-up counter where blacks were allowed to eat. She called the counter manager, who called the store manager, C.L. Harris. Harris asked Blair and his friends to leave, but the young men refused to budge. They had vowed not to move unless they were served.
Okay. So there is something in there that I think is interesting. Did you all notice this?
Yeah.
That the waitress was an African American, but yet she could serve the food, but she couldn't eat the food. Don't you think that's kind of weird? To me, I never understood how that made sense to the supposed segregationist people. That they were okay with that part, but they weren't okay with somebody sitting down. But that person that never made sense, Ashley.
There's I forgot what her name was, but she she's like a famous singer, and like she could only sing, but she couldn't like sit down to hear
Yeah.
eating and stuff.
Yeah.
She could only be on stage.
I mean, all of it's ridiculous, but to me, that, because their reasoning behind doing this, that's like, that doesn't even make sense to their convoluted, ridiculous reasoning. So it's just even furthermore stupidness. For something that was a really real. And here's the thing, guys. You all realize how stupid it is. But people then had been taught to think it was okay by their parents. And think about it. So many of the things you know and believe is because your parents taught you, right? People they trusted, grown-ups they trusted, taught them to think it was okay. And it's hard for young people that realize, you know, I was taught this way, but that's not okay. So that's why this was such a remarkable thing that young people realize we have to turn this around and stop this. Just wanted to point that out there. Okay, who would like to read the next part? 20. Harris contacted the police. Did you have your hand up? Okay, Angelo, will you read the next two paragraphs? So they felt really encouraged because they took a stand and they didn't get arrested. Well, that's going to then lead to coming back and continuing. Would you like to read, Ashley?
Can you say something about this?
Uh-huh.
Didn't like white people try to pull them off and stuff? Like,
Well, that's going to come. Not yet. Not yet. That's going to happen later. Yes. So the original sit-in at a restaurant, a Woolworths, I don't know the reason they chose that. My guess is because it was a place they knew that they could go, that they could protest where they knew it was happening. Because it wasn't happening everywhere. Would be my guess is why they went there, to that particular restaurant chain or store. It was really a store that had a lunch counter. Just like, you know, you go in the Target and there's a little snack area, or you go in Sam's Club and there's a little eating area. So, where it's a store, but they have an eating area. Okay, Melis, 22.
Back on campus, they spread word about the sit-in. The following day, they returned from the lunch counter, accompanied by about 30 students, male and female. Again, they were denied service.
On Wednesday, 63 of the 66 seats at the lunch counter was filled by black students. So those were a big, long lunch counters. Has anybody ever been to the Woolworths downtown here in Nashville? It's got a big, it's like, it has seat, like tables, but there's a big, long counter, right? I've never been to it. It's a restaurant, but it's got the big counter that you can sit at, just like a big, long counter that you sit on a bar stool or a swivel seat. All right. Paragraph 24, Madeline. Okay, so that would be important to say that now at this point, counter protesters were starting. That's people then protesting against them protesting, right? Okay, paragraph 25. I can't tell whose name's not up there selected. Zamara.
one black student offered to pay $5 for a bus and what would you say?
$5. That'd be like $50 now, probably. It's a ridiculous amount for water. And they're like, nope. Which shows you how stupid that it is. Okay, by Friday, 300 protesting youths filled the aisles at Woolworths. So they were actually, not only at the counters, they were actually filling into the store parts too. And on Saturday, even the football team at that college crowded into the store. The store was forced to close because of a bomb threat that afternoon, and the crowd carried its protest to a nearby store, Crest. That was a store. The store also closed for safety reasons. By the next week, sit-ins had occurred in stores throughout North Carolina. Protesters were picketing the Woolworths in New York City. A nationwide boycott was organized so no one would shop at Woolworths until the stores officially changed their policy and offered integrated lunch counters. Protests and sit-ins spread across the South to Virginia, Maryland, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida. Please follow with me, please, either on the screen or on your device. Not all protesters were as fortunate as Blair and his friends. Many were arrested, so they did start getting arrested, for trespassing and went to jail. Little by little, the sit-ins began to have an effect. During that spring, stores in Florida, Maryland, and Tennessee ended their segregated lunch counters. Some stores in Virginia and North Carolina followed suit, and finally, in late July, nearly 6 months later, Blair, Richmond, McNeil, and McCain's first shook up the town. The Woolworths lunch counters in Greensboro integrated. Through the struggle for equality continues, things are better today thanks to the part of 4 college students from Greensboro. Okay? So, when we come back from related studies, we will have you to answer the questions. If you will go ahead and open your agenda on your desk, you hit stop. And once you've done that, you may go line up in your related studies line.